So Cam Thomas exploding for 3 40-point games in a row and driving his sports card prices through the roof before being relegated to the bench reminded me of a key lesson we can learn from that happens over and over again with sports cards. The idea of FOMO, aka fear of missing out, isn't just prevalent with sports cards or investing, but we also see it in everyday life. How many times have you ever said no to going to an event until you found out everyone that you know is going except for you, and then you change your mind because you don't want to miss anything? I read a great book recently called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, and he was recently quoted saying that controlling FOMO is probably the most important financial skill these days in the social media era. And unfortunately, FOMO is everywhere nowadays, especially on social media, where we do hear about people making stacks of money on investments and to not miss out on the next hot tip. I'm not saying that these sort of purchases always end up as losses and we should put them down, but the issue is that you only really hear about the big winners and very rarely about the losers. So today I wanted to highlight some previous examples that can be applied to sports cards. So as I mentioned at the start, Cam Thomas is a great example to begin with. Combined with the Kyrie trade request and then his eventual trade, Cam Thomas was given an increased role where he was able to score 3 40-point games in a row, becoming the second youngest player behind LeBron James to score consecutive 40-point games. Now, I was very fortunate to buy a Blue Prism number to 199 the week before he blew up for $10. And you'll find in the past couple of weeks, there have been sales ranging from $100 to $200 stemming from people rushing out to buy him. The key with Thomas is his scoring ability and people projecting him to perhaps average 20 to 25 points a game with Kyrie and KD gone. But unfortunately, this has not been the case, as the Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving trades brought over a stack of players, including Spencer Dinwiddie and Mikal Bridges. And Thomas, unfortunately, has since been relegated to the bench as a 6th or even 7th man. I still think his future is quite bright, and it's not the first time in his young career that he's exploded, so I anticipate some more 30 and even 40-point games to come in the future. I just think if you really believe in him, why not just wait a little bit longer for his prices to come back down? Perhaps not at where they were previously, but still lower than where they are currently. All right, let's go through our history rewind first up with Kobe White from the Chicago Bulls. White was drafted at pick number 7 in the 2019 NBA draft and was actually the first player drafted from North Carolina to the Bulls since the GOAT Michael Jordan. Coming into the NBA, there was a little bit of comparison being a scoring point guard, and he was being compared to Gilbert Arenas. The start of his rookie season was often plagued by inefficient shooting nights with the occasional scoring explosion. None more interesting than his last 9 games of the season, where he averaged 26.1 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 4.4 assists on a ridiculous 48-43-90 split, coming off the bench in 8 of those games. He was also the first rookie to come off the bench and have 2 30-point games in a row, and his play even drew the admiration of Dwayne Wade, who said that him, Zion Williamson, and Ja Morant were his favourite rookies that year. You can't even imagine nowadays having Kobe White mentioned in the same breath as those 2 superstars. And he was even being compared to another scoring point guard in Trae Young, who also started his rookie season rough shooting-wise before exploding later in the season. White's rookie season ended prematurely thanks to the COVID suspension of the season, so we were kind of left with a bit of a what could have been taste in our mouths, which may have clouded our judgment. I specifically remember White being one of the more hyped rookies from that draft class leading into that big break before the bubble season resumed again. And unfortunately, we've never seen Kobe White reach those heights again, and I think those Trae Young comparisons seem a little bit out of the question now. But let's go through a few of his card prices I found from 2020 and compare them to now. So first up, we have his absolute to 175 rookie autograph, which went for $85 in July 2020. Fast forwarding to a few weeks ago, and same card's going for $11. Even like a beautiful, nice, sort of high-end card in his Noir RPA card to 99, going for a pretty ridiculous price, around $200 in July 2020. Fast forward to now, and the exact same card's going for $26, and this was actually around November last year. With each season that's gone by, his role does seem to diminish a little bit, and it looks like he's not going to be in the Bulls' long-term plans, especially with free agency coming up. He's still a solid player and young at the age of 22, so I think he can still project as a great 6th man off the bench, but not at the level of scoring he was initially forecast at. Moving on to another player who was able to capitalize on the resumption of the NBA season after COVID suspended it, and that's Bol Bol. So before he even got drafted, some people said he was forecast to have the 3rd highest upside in the draft besides Zion and Ja Morant. And I do feel like this case is a little bit more memorable for us all. We went 4 months starved of NBA action, not even knowing if the season would go on, and finally we got word in June 2020 that it would resume. But first, before the actual season even began, the NBA decided it would be best to do some televised scrimmages between teams just to knock some of the cobwebs off. So after 4 months of no basketball, we would treated to a scrimmage between the Denver Nuggets and the Washington Wizards where we saw Bol Bol explode for 16 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 blocks. Keep in mind, this is actually Bol Bol's NBA debut as he was injured for the start of the actual NBA season. And adding to the mystery of Bol Bol was the fact that when he was rehabbing and practicing, it was usually behind closed doors and he was usually gone by the time the media even came in. So combined with the first taste of basketball in 4 months and our first time seeing Bol Bol on a basketball court televised, we saw one of the biggest and quickest price jumps. I still distinctly remember waking up, checking my phone as you do, seeing my Facebook feed cluttered with posts celebrating Bol Bol, and then people also showing off their collections. And we can even see some of the ridiculous prices they went for immediately after the scrimmage. So immediately after the scrimmage, we have a couple of sales here of his red disco prism to $125, going for $150 and $300. Even his silver prism went for a ridiculous price, jumping up to just over $100. And nowadays we know base is almost worth nothing, but his base prism jumped up to $30 to $35. In doing some research, I even found an article from a Golden State fan page that said it was a mistake passing on Bol Bol in preference for Jordan Poole, which if you look back at now is quite crazy to think. And quote, "We can't help but imagine how this roster would look with Bol in the lineup rather than Poole." Nowadays, Bol Bol has had a little bit of a resurgence playing for a new team in the Orlando Magic, and he's quietly shed his injury-prone tag this season. He started well this season, but has faded now, playing in 54 games, averaging 10.4 points, 6.2 rebounds, and 1.3 blocks per game. Keep in mind, the most games he's played before this season was only 32, so you'd assume that he's not accustomed to a full 82-game season. And another key to his regression is the fact that the Magic are loaded with big guys in Wendell Carter Jr., Jonathan Isaac, Mo Wagner, and even Paolo Banchero, if you count him as a big guy, which has led to reduced minutes. He's not a bad player by any means, but nowhere near the heights of where he was after that first bubble game, and if you bought right after that game, you'd be down a massive chunk. The last case study we'll revisit is another who exploded in non-meaningful minutes in Talon Horton-Tucker from the Utah Jazz. Another player from 2020 who had a spike, and I kind of think it's funny how all three stories are from 2020. I think it does highlight that we are getting better at avoiding these increases as lessons have been learned since then. Horton-Tucker was another right place, right time sort of player, considering he played for one of the biggest teams in the NBA in the Lakers, who was also just coming off an NBA championship. And in the first 2 games of the preseason against the Clippers, immediately after winning the championship, THT was able to drop 19 and 33 points respectively, gaining him a ton of admirers. None more so than his teammate at the time, LeBron James, who shared a highlight reel of his first game on Twitter, marking him special. He even had another superstar in Kawhi Leonard questioning how old he was mid-game, just showing the level of hype he gained from a couple of games. It did give everyone excitement considering that it looked like the Lakers had found another weapon in their arsenal for a second straight title. Unlike Bol Bol, there were a flood of posts and comments saying he should play more, and as we can see from these comps around that period, his prices had a massive jump. Nothing too significant, but right after his big game, his silver select card was going for $50. Nowadays, I think you'd be hard pressed to probably find one in the $5 range, probably even less than that. Unfortunately, his career has tailed off after that, even with an increased role and a slightly overpaid contract. Much so to the point that the Laker fans couldn't wait to get rid of him, and his value dwindled down to the point that he was used in a package to get Pat Beverly. His minutes are quite sporadic on the Jazz, and his career averages at 8.9 points on 43% shooting and 27% from the three-point line do indicate that his three-point shot is still inconsistent and is a little bit of an awkward player in terms of fit. So these 3 stories on top of Cam Thomas are great reminders in the lesson of FOMO with the sports card hobby. If you're ever excited to buy a player after a key moment or a game, just remember to wait it out and you're more than likely to get them at a cheaper price. Let me know in the comments if you remember any similar stories over the past few years, because there's a wide range of them. And make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys all in future videos. Take care.